welcome back to the Deep Dive. So I want to start today by putting two things on the table that, at first glance, just seem like they belong in completely different universes.
Okay, I'm listening. What have we got?
You know, if you saw them together at a party, you'd assume they have absolutely nothing to talk about.
Right.
On the left, you've got the electric vehicle. It's physical, it's heavy, well, it's rubber meeting the road, designed to move your body from point A to point B.
Tangible hardware. You can kick the tires.
Exactly. It's the absolute darling of the green energy movement.
Yeah.
The poster child for a sustainable future.
And on the right?
On the right side, you have Bitcoin. It's invisible. It's decentralized. It exists entirely in code on a server somewhere.
Yeah.
It's this financial network that, I mean, a lot of people still think is just magic internet money.
So hardware versus software, transportation versus finance. It's apples and, I don't know, spaceships.
Precisely.
Yeah.
But as I was going through the stack of research for today, and we have a really eclectic mix, I mean, from heavy technical grid simulations to some wild stories about guys hacking their cars, I realized something.
What's that?
These two technologies, they share the exact same DNA.
That's a bold claim. But, when you look at the evolutionary history and the sources, you're right. They are both what I'd call apex disruptors.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
They aren't just new gadgets like a better toaster or a faster phone. They are existential threats to systems that have been running the world for 100 years.
You mean the internal combustion engine and the central banking system?
The two pillars of modern civilization, yeah. And because they're attacking such massive incumbents, they've both had this very specific, very rocky childhood. I mean, think about the early days. Who was buying a Tesla Roadster in 2008? Who was mining Bitcoin in 2010?
It was the nerds,
Yeah.
right? Bitcoin was for cryptographers and privacy geeks who didn't trust the government. And EVs were for eco-visionaries who didn't mind driving what was basically a glorified golf cart with a laptop battery in it.
Precisely. They were toys. But then they both hit that classic S-curve of adoption. They went from ignored to laughed at to fought against.
And now
they feel inevitable. You see Teslas at every intersection. Wall Street's buying Bitcoin ETFs. But, and this is the hook for today's deep dive, because they're so disruptive, they also share the same villain narrative.
Oh, absolutely. You can't open a newspaper without seeing it. They're painted as these parasites.
Right.
Bitcoin is boiling the oceans. EVs are going to crash the grid.
The energy gluttons.
Exactly. They are both accused of being these massive energy hogs.
It's the energy narrative. And that right there brings us to the mission of this deep dive. We're going to look at some very dense, frankly surprising technical reports that suggest that whole narrative might be completely backward.
The sources are definitely teasing a massive plot twist here.
It is a twist. The data suggests that we shouldn't be pitting these two against each other. In fact, one of them, the one that's usually blamed for wasting energy,
Bitcoin.
might be the only thing that stops the other one from completely destroying the power grid.
That is a huge statement. So just to give everyone a roadmap, we've got the raw energy numbers that might shock you. We have a technical report on something called the IE14 bus test system.
Sounds intimidating, but we'll break it down.
Yeah, we will. And then we have some truly bizarre stories about people turning their cars into crypto mining rigs.
It's gonna get weird. And we'll wrap it all up with a look at how blockchain technology might just end up being the brain that manages the entire electrical grid of the future.
Okay, let's unpack this DNA idea a little more. Before we get to the grid mechanics, there's a psychological layer here that the sources really highlight. It's almost like the fan bases overlap.
They do. And honestly, you can't talk about that overlap without talking about the Elon factor.
Of course. I knew his name was coming up.
Well, you have to mention him. Musk and Tesla, they really bridged that gap. It created a psychological link for investors. If you're the kind of person who believes in a high-tech, decentralized, battery-powered future, you probably own a Tesla and you probably own some Bitcoin.
It's the Tech Bro starter pack.
It is, but it's also the polarization. I feel like you never meet someone who is just, I don't know, meh about these things.
Right. You're either a believer who thinks it's saving the world, or you're a detractor who thinks it's a scam or a toy.
That polarization is the immune response of the status quo. I mean, when you threaten big oil or big banks, you're going to get a strong reaction. But there's a deeper anxiety here that the sources point out.
Which is?
It's infrastructure anxiety.
Which is basically, what happens if
the lights go out? Exactly. Both of these technologies are completely useless without a network. Bitcoin needs miners and nodes to verify transactions. EVs need charging stations to move.
if the grid fails, your digital wallet and your electric car are just bricks.
Yeah, and that's a valid fear, especially when we look at the sheer amount of juice these things need.
We have data here from Decentral Technologies that breaks down the raw numbers. Let's look at this objectively. Give us the scale of the problem.
Okay, so let's look at the snapshot provided in the source. Bitcoin's network consumes roughly 91 terawatt hours annually.
Okay, so contextualize that for me. Is that a city? A state?
That's a country.
Hmm.
That is comparable to the entire energy consumption of nations like Finland or, say, the Philippines.
Mm-hmm.
It's a massive amount of energy. There's no getting around that fact.
All right, so the critics aren't wrong about the scale. What about the cars?
As of the 2020 data in our source, with about 10 million EVs on the road, they were consuming around 29.2 terawatt hours.
So at that specific moment in time, Bitcoin was the bigger glutton.
Significantly bigger, almost triple. But, and this is the crucial part, the growth curves are completely different. Bitcoin has efficiency mechanisms built in, the halving, the difficulty adjustment.
Like EVs.
With EVs, we are trying to replace every single gas car on Earth. That 29 terawatt hour figure is going to absolutely skyrocket.
Which leads to what the reading calls the hypocrisy argument. It argues there's a double standard in how we talk about this energy use.
Right. The argument goes like this. EVs consume massive amounts of energy and will soon consume much, much more, but they get a pass.
Why?
Because the perceived value is high, reducing tailpipe emissions. Bitcoin consumes energy, and it's criticized solely for the consumption, often ignoring the economic value it secures.
The source mentioned Bitcoin secures over $1 trillion in value. So, about 1% of the world's GDP using less than 0.1% of the world's energy. It's an efficiency argument.
It is, but if you really want to understand why they impact the grid so differently, you have to look at where the energy comes from. This is the concept of geographic agnosticism.
I highlighted that term. It sounds fancy, but it just means Bitcoin doesn't care where it lives, right?
Yeah. Exactly. Imagine you have a hydroelectric dam in a remote part of Quebec, or maybe a wind farm in West Texas. At night, the wind's blowing, the water's flowing, the turbines are spinning, but everyone in the nearby town is asleep. Their lights are off.
So that power is being generated, but nobody's buying it.
Correct. It's wasted. You can't just store electricity in a bucket. If you don't use it the moment it's made, it's gone.
Okay.
But you can drop a shipping container full of Bitcoin miners right next to that dam. They turn on when there's excess power, and they turn off when the town needs the electricity. They are a buyer of last resort. They monetize wasted energy.
Right. Whereas an EV, well, I can't exactly drive my Tesla to a remote dam in Quebec every night to charge it.
No, you're tethered. You charge where you live. And if you live in a city powered by coal, your green car is running on coal.
So Bitcoin hunts for the cheap renewables.
Because that's where the profit margin is. EVs are just stuck with whatever the local grid offers.
Okay, so Bitcoin is flexible and EVs are stubborn. That brings us to the aha moment of this episode, the technical report.
This is the dense stuff. This is where we get into the engineering.
It is. It discusses grid stability using a simulation called the IE14 bus test system. Now, to the layperson, that sounds like a public transit schedule, but it's actually a standard engineering model for a power grid, isn't it?
Think of it as a crash test dummy for electricity. It simulates a network with power plants, transmission lines, and consumers. The connection points, in engineering terms, we call them buses or nodes.
And the researchers ran a simulation to see what happens to these buses when you add Bitcoin mining versus what happens when you add mass EV charging.
And the results were not what you'd expect. The report claims that Bitcoin, the big bad energy villain, is actually the stabilizer. It all comes down to their behavioral profiles.
Okay, break that down for us.
Imagine a Bitcoin mine. It runs 24/7. It draws a flat, steady line of power. It doesn't spike. It doesn't dip. In the grid world, we call this a high load factor. It's an anchor.
And grid operators like boring.
Yeah.
They like predictability.
Oh, they love it. It helps them forecast thermal limits, which is basically making sure the wires don't get so hot they melt. Now, contrast that with an EV.
The EV is chaos.
Total chaos. It's a high variability load. You come home from work at 6:00 p.m. You plug in. Your neighbor plugs in at 6:15. The guy down the street plugs in at 5:30.
That creates the report calls stochastic peaks.
Stochastic just means random, exactly. And hard to predict. It creates this jagged mountain range on the energy demand graph.
And the simulation showed something pretty scary. They ran a scenario called LDX7, basically increasing the load by 7 times to simulate mass EV adoption.
And the grid broke.
It didn't just break, it collapsed. The report pinpointed bus 7, a specific node in this test grid. Under that heavy EV load, bus 7 showed a voltage variation of 51.7%.
Whoa! Hold on. Let's make sure everyone understands the gravity of that. A 50% variation. In your house, if the voltage drops 50%, your fridge stops working and your lights go out.
It's worse than that. Your expensive electronics might fry, and the grid safety systems would trip, causing a blackout. A 51% drop is a catastrophic failure of voltage regulation.
And it wasn't just bus 7.
No, the instability spread to the peripheral nodes, bus 13 and 14.
So the extremities of the grid just started dying off.
Exactly, because the demand was too spiky, too unpredictable. The grid just couldn't ramp up power fast enough to meet those random peaks.
The irony here is just incredibly rich. The green cars, our supposed saviors, are the ones threatening to crash the grid because of their unpredictable behavior.
While digital gold, which everyone thinks is just wasting power, acts as a steady base load that keeps the whole system stable.
That's the conclusion. Bitcoin mining provides a steady heartbeat. EVs are giving the grid a heart attack.
But the report didn't just talk about crashing. It talked about islands. This sounded a bit more hopeful. What is islanded operation?
This happens when you have a lot of distributed generation, like a neighborhood with a lot of solar panels or a local wind farm. The simulation showed that during peak production, windows like, say, 4.0 a.m. to 7.0 a.m. for when certain nodes could effectively cut the cord.
Bus 7 and 8, right?
That's right. They could break away from the central power plant. They become self-sufficient. They're generating more power than they consume.
So in that moment, they are an energy island.
And that's the dream of a decentralized grid where communities aren't reliant on a massive power plant hundreds of miles away.
And this ties into the economic side of things, too. We talked about how Bitcoin is agnostic to location. The sources highlight how this is revitalizing places that have been left behind.
This is the human element that gets lost in all the technical jargon. The digital economy usually benefits big cities, Silicon Valley, New York, London. But Bitcoin mining moves to where the cheap power is.
Which is usually the middle of nowhere.
Exactly. The source mentions Rockdale, Texas.
I looked that up. It used to be an aluminum town.
Yeah.
Alcoa was there. Then the industry left, and the town was dying.
And now it's a global mining hub. They're using the massive electrical infrastructure left behind by that aluminum plant. It creates jobs, tax revenue. It revitalizes the local economy.
Same thing in Quebec.
Right. Miners pay the utility companies for power that would otherwise be wasted. That revenue helps keep electricity costs lower for the grandmothers living in the local village.
And you contrast that with EVs. If I buy a Tesla in San Francisco, that's great for me and maybe for the air quality in San Francisco, but it doesn't do a thing for Rockdale, Texas.
No, EV benefits are localized to where the cars are usually wealthy urban centers. Bitcoin brings the digital economy to the rural periphery.
Speaking of the middle of nowhere and doing crazy things, we have to take a detour to the miner's source. This is the lighter side of the deep dive, but it illustrates just how blurry the lines are getting.
You've got people mining crypto with their cars. This is just proof that if you give a nerd a battery and a computer, they will absolutely try to make money with it.
So tell me about Siraj Raval. This story is wild.
So Siraj is a Tesla Model 3 owner in San Francisco. He decided he wasn't making enough money just driving the car, so he hacked into his car's firmware and physically connected GPU's graphic processing units directly to the car's massive battery.
He hotwired his Tesla to mine Ethereum.
Essentially, yeah. He stuffed these hot-running computers into the front trunk. He claimed that during the peak of Ethereum prices in 2021, he was making between $400 and $800 a month.
That literally pays the car note.
It might, but I mean, think about the heat. Think about the warranty he definitely voided. And honestly, relying on the price of Ethereum to pay your car loan is risky.
To say the least. And then you have Chris Alessi. He's a car dealer, right?
A dealer and a tinkerer. And he had an older Tesla model that came with a special perk. Free supercharging for life.
Oh, I see where this is going. Free electricity equals pure profit.
Exactly. He hooked up a Bitmain Antminer S9, which is this loud, industrial-grade Bitcoin mining rig, directly to his car battery through an inverter. He was using the free supercharging to turn electricity into Bitcoin.
That feels like an infinite money glitch.
It does, but Chris Alessi was actually the voice of reason here. He tried another method, using the car's internal browser to mine a coin called Monero. He ran it for 60 hours.
And he made it dead.
$10.
Ouch.
And he pointed out that the wear and tear on the car's screen and battery, which cost thousands to replace, was just not worth the $10.
Okay, so official warning to our listeners. Do not try this at home. You will melt your frunk.
Definitely. It's a proof of concept, not a business plan. But it shows how the lines are blurring. Your car is a battery, a computer, and potentially a revenue stream.
Which leads us perfectly into the final segment, the future. So if we have EVs causing chaos on the grid and Bitcoin offering stability and people hacking their cars, how do we manage all this? The sources talk about the wild new grid in a project called In Excess.
This is where we stop looking at these technologies as separate things and start seeing them as one system. The grid needs a brain. It needs a management layer to handle all this complexity.
And the experts are arguing that blockchain, the tech behind Bitcoin, is that brain.
They talk about tokenizing energy, and it's not just forcing crypto into places it doesn't belong.
No.
No, think of it as gamifying energy usage to solve that chaos we talked about earlier. The text describes business models like smart contracts for EVs.
How would that actually work for a normal person?
Okay, imagine it's 6:00 p.m. The grid is stressed, everyone's home, you plug in your car. Usually it just starts charging and adds to the problem. But in this new grid, a smart contract pops up on your phone or your car dashboard.
Like a notification?
Right, and it says, the grid is overloaded. If you wait until 2:00 a.m. to charge, we will pay you 5 tokens.
So it automates the negotiation.
Yes, it creates a financial incentive for you to help the grid. It's called pay for performance. You aren't just buying power, you are selling your patience back to the grid.
And they mentioned smart boilers too.
Same concept. You take an old, dumb gas boiler in a basement, you slap an internet-connected controller on it, an IoT device, and connect it to the blockchain. Suddenly, that boiler can track its own efficiency. That data can be sold to the utility company, or the boiler can be turned down remotely for 10 minutes during peak hours in exchange for tokens.
Now, I know what some listeners are thinking. Great, we're going to use blockchain to run the grid. Isn't blockchain terrible for the environment? We just spent 10 minutes talking about Bitcoin's energy usage.
And this is a crucial distinction the source makes. The risk assessment for using blockchain as a grid manager says the environmental risk is actually low.
How is that possible?
Because they wouldn't use the same proof-of-work system that Bitcoin uses. Bitcoin uses proof-of-work because it needs to be incredibly secure against nation-state level attacks. A grid management chain would use something like proof of authority or proof of stake.
Which means
It means you don't need massive warehouses of miners solving puzzles. You just need a few trusted validators, maybe the utility companies themselves. The source says these chains consume 99% less energy. They're incredibly efficient.
so the risk isn't energy. What is it?
The risks are legal and technological. The source actually lists them as extreme risks.
Legal makes sense. If my boiler is sending data to the blockchain, does the government know how hot I keep my house?
Exactly. GDPR and data privacy laws are a nightmare here. But the technological risk is the one that sounds like a sci-fi movie. They mention future fragility due to quantum computing.
Quantum computing.
If quantum computers become a reality, they could theoretically crack the cryptography that secures these blockchains. And if the grid is run on a blockchain and someone cracks the code,
They turn off the lights.
everywhere. That's the vulnerability.
It's never simple, is it? Just when you solve one problem, a quantum computer shows up to ruin your day.
That's the nature of innovation. You
Yeah.
solve one problem, you create 3 new ones. But the potential upside a grid that balances itself automatically is worth the risk.
So let's wrap this up. We started this deep dive thinking Bitcoin and EVs were enemies. 2 villains fighting over the last scraps of electricity.
But we found that they are actually symbiotic. Bitcoin acts as the stabilizer, the anchor for the volatility that EVs introduce. They really do complement each other.
And we learned that the future isn't just about plugging things in. It's about a wild new grid where your car, your boiler, and your wallet are all talking to each other through blockchain.
And that leads to the final question I want the listener to consider. In this new world, where your car is a battery that sells power back to the grid, where your heater is a data point earning tokens, and your behavior is constantly being negotiated by smart contracts, well, you are no longer just a customer.
No, you're an active participant.
You are essentially your own utility company. You're a node in the network. The real question is, are you ready for that responsibility? Because it's coming, whether we're ready or not.
That is a lot to chew on. You know, before we sign off, I want to break the format for a second.
Go for it.
We throw a lot of information at you in these deep dives. Voltage variations, terawatt hours, crypto mining cars. And it's a loud world out there, you know, full of notifications, endless feeds, and just constant noise. I want to say a sincere thank you. Thank you for lending us your ears and, more importantly, your time. In an economy that's built on attention, giving us yours is the most valuable currency there is. We really don't take it for granted. We hope this deep dive gave you something real to think about, something that sticks with you after you take your headphones off.
Well said. Thank you for listening and for being curious enough to dive deep with us.
We'll catch you on the next one.